John, it's so good to have you back. We're going to now look at some of these examples that we talked about. Let's look at the embryological cycle. This is a common one that we hear all over the world, that there are these 4 stages of the embryological cycle that only somebody today with a microscope could have known about. How could a prophet or someone with no scientific knowledge, he could even read and write, how could he have known something that specific, that particular, in the 7th century? Do you have an answer for that?
Yeah, I mean, if you read the Qur'an and you read Surah Al-Mu'minun, which is the 23rd chapter of the Qur'an, verses 12 to 14, and we read, we created...
Let's do that again. Chapter 23, verse 12 to 14 is where it is first listed. Go ahead.
Yeah. And we read there, we created man from an extract of clay. Then we made him as a drop in a place of settlement firmly fixed.
Nectar out of clay, drop. Okay.
Then we made the drop into an alaka. Then we made the alaka into a mugga, which means chewed substance.
Okay.
And so the word alaka can mean leech, it can mean suspended thing, or it can mean blood clot. And so basically, what Muslims have argued is they typically make these drawings of the embryo looking somewhat like a leech or something like that. There's a popular Islamic apologetics book called A Brief Illustrated Guide to Understanding Islam, and they have a leech which is compared with the human embryo. I think the drawings are highly exaggerated. I don't think it really looks like that. They also show a piece of chewed gum with tooth marks that resemble somites, and that the embryo will be a pharyngula stage embryo, and they will try to show a resemblance there, but really it's just the chewed gum has been manipulated to look like the human embryo when really there is no resemblance at all. It's really clutching its straws, I think, to make that type of argument.
Let me ask you, how big are when we're talking about the alaka stage, that's the 2nd stage. The 1st stage is the zygote stage. Now that you cannot observe with the human eye.
Well, no, the pharyngula stage is like the mid stage. This is speaking about vertebrate embryos in particular. The pharyngula stage is this highly conserved phylotypic stage, at which vertebrate embryos are more similar than they are
is
at earlier
visible
stages.
To the naked eye?
No.
When a woman has a miscarriage?
No.
You cannot. So it is too small for the naked eye to
Correct.
see that state. So they would have a pretty good argument if someone in the 7th century can observe something that's not visible to the naked eye. How did he know, even whether or not it is using gum or any other object, how would he have known that particular, that early, without a microscope?
Well, I don't think he did. I mean, I think the idea of a piece of chewed gum is really just clutching at straws. I mean, to refute the argument, all you have to do is look at the diagrams and see how they've manipulated those images to make it look as much like an embryo as they possibly can. You know, the tooth marks and the embryo in this particular book, A Brief Illustrated Guide to Understanding Islam, are positioned just at the right place to resemble
so you're
somites.
saying these are modern facsimiles that they've created out of gum or whatever today to try to explain what Muhammad would have written in the 7th century.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me ask you something else. Is there any other source that maybe whoever wrote the Quran, whether it's Muhammad or other, he couldn't read or write, but whoever wrote it down, is there another source they could have gotten those stages from?
Well, I don't think that these stages really resemble modern embryology as Muslims contend, so I don't...
So what do you think they do resemble? Where do you think that they got that embryological cycle from? They meaning the ones who wrote the Quran.
I don't know.
Let me give you a hint. How about Galen? Do you know Galen?
I'm not familiar with that.
Galen is actually an embryologist who is a Jewish embryologist writing in the 2nd century. He talks about the exact same 4 stages that you just read about in Surah 23. The zygote stage, followed by the alaka stage. He doesn't use the word alaka, he says chewed mass. Alaka is the Arabic for that description.
Right.
Followed by the bone stage, followed by the flesh stage. The exact same 4 stages you find in the Quran are found in Galen's writing from the 2nd century, used in Ctesiphon. It was well known that this is what was taught in what is today Baghdad. Ctesiphon is the archaic name for Baghdad. So Baghdad's not too far away from where Islam began. In fact, what we now know is the Quran was put together more than likely in Damascus and in Baghdad. It stands to reason that they were borrowing what was already there. But there's a problem. Now, you're not an embryologist, but you're a cell biologist. You know that whether or not it was zygote going up to the alaka, going up to the bones, going up to the meat, Do the bones form before the flesh?
No, they don't.
They form simultaneously, don't they?
Yeah.
So even Galen made a mistake. That mistake is incorporated into the Quran.
Yeah, exactly.
Modern biologists know that, and they say, hold on a minute, we don't use Galen anymore because of that mistake. Why did the Quran use that? Well, obviously because they were borrowing. And when you borrow, you don't really think through, or you don't even know whether or not this is a mistake. We now know it's a mistake today. So there's one example of borrowing. There's another example of using modern chewing gum, is one case, of trying to make it look like taking a word alaka without realizing this is all from Galen. But where did Galen get this from? How did he know about the zygote? How did he know about the chewed mash? Since he didn't have microscopes even in the 2nd century. Ooh, I love this.
Yeah.
But it even goes further back than that. Because we also know that the Greeks knew about the different stages. We have Aristotle talking about 15 stages of the embryo. How did Aristotle know this? He was writing in the 4th century BC. Ooh, I love this. So there's nothing new under the sun. This has all been borrowed from other sources. Listen, thanks so much. This is great. That's the first one. We're now going to look at some other scientific proofs. Stay tuned. We'll come right back.